PHP functions, they offer the ability for the programmer to group together program code that performs specific task or function into a single unit that can be used within the program. So whenever we have a function, in essence, what you're trying to do is to put code together that we can reuse within the program or within the script. So functions are defined by providing the a name, and then later you invoke that name. If you're not dealing with the predefined functions within PHP, you can create your own functions. And as you create these functions, you can have them either accept data, which is in form of arguments, and they can also return results. Some of the built-in functions are something like square root, rounding the number to the something like a nearest value. Then we can also check is a number, a certain value, we can check whether it is a number. We can also generate random numbers. There's also a function for the date. An example which is given there, string reverse function, then it is given a string in the reverse order, hello world. And you can see the output on the far right side is the hello world, showing what was being given by when we give a string reverse of that. To define a function, we start with the function keyword. Then you give the function name, the name that you'd want, and then you give the parameters and the arguments that you'd want. Then within, that is supposed to be done within brackets. Then the block of code or the task that is supposed to be done is supposed to be within what we call the curly braces. An example is function keyword. Then our function, we are calling it greet. So this greet method does not, our function does not have any arguments in it. But then when someone calls this function, it's going to give out the hello. And you can see it's given down there with two greet, and the output on the right hand side, which is hello, hello for the function name. So you start with a letter or an underscore, and then it can consist either letters or numbers or even an underscore. Then you also need to avoid the built-in function names like string length that we saw, something like a random, because you already know those ones have a given meaning. So case does not matter. When we say case does not matter, it means that when you have the function name being something like hello in caps or hello in small letters, then it doesn't matter. But in many cases, we always insist that you try as much as possible to be consistent in terms of defining your functions. Whenever a function maybe has some arguments, it can do some computations, and after doing some computations, it can return a value. What you need to use is the return keyword is used, and that return keyword is the one that is going to give you the result for whatever you want. So this function called greeting has a return keyword, and this return is returning the hello string. So when we print greeting, so the greeting and the parentheses, this is what you're doing here is to call the greeting function. So when we call this greeting function, it returns hello. So the first statement is going to print hello Glenn, and the second one is going to print hello Sally. Then the arguments are the values that we set together with the within the function. So those are the what we call the optional argument that can be received by the function. This function called howdy is receiving language as a variable. So you can see this is a variable that is defined as language, and it checks if the language is English, then you return hola. But if the language is French, this is FR to mean French, then you're supposed to return bonjour. Optional arguments are those that have defaults, like and that means it can be omitted. So if we call this function howdy now, because it's receiving language, but it has a default which has been set as English by default. So you see the last two statements, the second last statement down there, which is howdy calling the function without any argument being passed. Then Glenn is going to give out hola Glenn, because the default value now for the language is set to be English, and that's what is returning the hola. But whenever you set it with the French, then it's going to give out bonjour Sally. We have two ways in which we can call a function. You can either call it by value, or you can call it by reference. When you call a method by value, what you do is the variable within the function is an alias. That is to mean it is a copy. And that means whenever you call it, that's one that is going to be changed. But the actual value is not changed. So this method, which is called double in our example, has or receives a variable called alias. Now we are taking alias and then we are assigning it the value of alias multiplied by 2. So in this case, let's say the value of alias that is sent is 10. So what this means is that the new value of alias is going to be taken to be 10 times 2. And the next argument where we have the double value is being given by double, then variable being given is going to return now the value which is 10 times 2. So the results which are given on the right side, the value remains to be 10, but the double now is changed to be 20. The ampersand sign, that's the one we use to indicate that we are calling by reference. So in this case, the value of 10 on this variable val is going to be changed. So whether you try now to check the value of val, or you check the value of a value maybe like a triple, it's going to have changed everything. In this case, because we had already referenced or called the function and this particular argument by reference. So that changes everything. So I'm going to call these PHP functions like that. So function, then I give the name, and then I define whatever I want this function to do. Kids can code class, call hello, hello function. This is the part I have inserted, which is the PHP function, and then hello kids can code class. And this is going to have some arguments. Then it's also going to have a return value. So what this function is going to do is to return a, then I multiply that one by something like 20. Echo multiplier, and this multiplier is going to require a value from me. So the value for now I'm going to set is something like 2. We have 40. I can call the method once again. This is a statement after the first call, and I have another product. You can do a call either by reference or by value. The value of val is its multiplier. Call by value. Then I have the other one. I'm just going to repeat the code. And now this is call by reference. Define another function. and the product, I'm going now to use the ampersand as we said, and still it's going to be the same function, but realize that now I'm using an ampersand. So the same thing is going to be done. I'm doing the same thing, but you realize here, instead of calling it by value, I'm calling it by reference, which is why I have used that ampersand. This is going to be val2, so I put the val2 there, and here is also val2, but I'm also going to call this, the method we are using is product. So that's the method we are using. We refresh. When we do a call by reference, the values are going to be changed. Arrays in PHP, they used to contain data values, which is the case of, it can be a list of numbers. So an array is an example of what we would call a variable, a PHP variable. But in this case, it contains maybe a list of numbers or names or grocery items. We have what we call sequential arrays, and these keep track of the data items by using sequential numbers. We also have what we call associative array. Associative array, they keep track of the data items by using character strings. And so the types are going to be either what we call indexed. The indexed ones are the same case as what we would call the sequential array. So in this case, the array with a numeric index. Then with the associative arrays, they use what we call named keys. I'm going to show you an example. And then we also have multi-dimensional arrays, which are arrays containing one or more arrays within them. They are going to include a flexible number of list items, and then you can add or delete, items within the array, which makes it very easy to maintain. Then you can also check the different items within an array. Arrays also have special operators and functions, and these built-in functions can make the things of counting items or even sorting array a bit faster for you. We have an array called student, and the way you declare that is you have the array keyword, and within it you define the list items. So within the array function here, the array keyword, and then the brackets, you have Johnson, you have Jackson, and Jefferson. So those are elements or items within this array called student. Array always starts counting from 0 all the way to n-1. So like the array which is Johnson, Jackson, and Jefferson, Johnson is at location 0, Jackson is at location 1, and Jefferson is at location 2, because these are 3 items, which will be n-1. You can use an array shift to remove an item from the beginning. You can also use an array push to add an item to the end. You can also sort, use the sort function to reorder items in numerical alphabetical order. And even you can use array and shift to add an item. Associative arrays uses what we call the named keys. You have the key and then the value for that. So you have like the key for science is the key science, then the value is myth. Another key is, the named key is math, then Jones, and you have another key English, which is Jack. So this is showing the instructors for the different subjects. And using for each, you just have instructors as subject, then the key. So yeah, the subject here becomes the key, and the value becomes what is given there as the teacher. So then you echo, subject is this, and then the teacher is this for the array that you're trying to have. So this is an example of still adding more details. These are functions for the associative arrays that can be used, like how you can add an item, and how you can also unset, and how you can verify different things. Then multi-dimensional array, we have said this is an array that contains several other arrays, and an example is a two-dimensional table, which is shown. So we have a part, which is a hammer, and then it has a count of 20. So we have, if you look at this inventory array, it has the first AC10. So that first AC10 is a key that is also an array. So this key is an array having these other data values, which is part, a named key or with hammer, and then a key count with the value of 22, and a key price of 12.50. I want to create an array called students. So I assign it, I start with the keyword array, and this is within the brackets. So the first element is going to be, let's say, something like James. Then the second one is going to be Martin. Then the third one is going to be Mike. And I can add maybe the last one to be someone like Helen. So I can now output whatever value I want. So like if I echo students at location, at location 1, so they should give us the value of Martin. The next one I'm going to do is associative array, grade. So then I have array. The grade for James is something like A, and that is going to happen now for all the others. So you can just copy this and paste. And if I just use 3, that should be enough. So for James, then for Martin, and probably for Helen. So let's say Martin has a C, and then probably Helen has a name minor. So if now I echo this, what I'm going to echo is so this is supposed to be grade, is the name of the array. Connecting PHP and MySQL. Now, when it comes to PHP and MySQL, what is important, or what you're going to be looking at, is the database connection. And connecting to a MySQL database using PHP can be achieved through 3 ways. We have what we call the MySQL improved, which is MySQLi, PHP extension. We also have what we call the PHP data objects, PDO, and we have what we call the legacy MySQL functions. The first one is MySQLi, the second one is the PDO and how it is achieved, and the third one is the MySQL, the legacy MySQL function. We have PDO, which is the PHP data object. So this is a set of PHP extensions that provide a core PDO class and database specific drivers. Now it provides a vendor neutral lightweight database access abstraction layer, and the focus is on data access rather than database abstraction. And the advantages for us to use this is that it supports several databases. So whatever code we are going to write, you can use it for MySQL, like now we are going to be doing. You can use it for Postgres SQL. You can use it for Oracle. You can use it even for SQLite. So that's the best thing about using this PDO. Then it also allows use of exceptions for error handling, and then now we can prepare statements that can help you against malicious SQL injection. The first thing will be creating a connection. Then after we create a connection, I mentioned that we are going to do the key operations, and we called it CRUD operations. The CRUD operations, that means we do a create, we do a read or view, we do an update, and then we do a delete. So for us to achieve that, we need to have connected to the database. And this is now through a script that we are going to write. So to do that connection, you need the host. The host and the name, mainly we call that one the driver. In some cases, when you're trying to check some code, you might see that one as a driver. So what we are trying to do in this case is that the database host is the local host. For now that we are using it within our local host, then you have the database name. So whichever the name of database you have, you can provide it there. Then the user, mainly for MySQL, the user is the root and we don't have a password. But if you have a database that you have a username and also you have a password, then that's those are the values you provide there. So we have a variable. So now that we are dealing with the PHP code, the code that is shown on the left-hand side mainly is just the variables that you're declaring for you to use. So when you're doing, when we are creating the database handler, which is given by DBH, and you can give it any other name. I could even have called it connection. So we are saying this is a new PDO, that is to mean PHP data object. Then we have MySQL. So we give it MySQL host, we give it the value, which is the local host that we have already defined. Then we have the database name, which is the DB name that we have provided here. And then we have the user, and then we have the password. So after we have done that, our connection is created. After that connection, and you have done all the things you wanted, now you can close the connection. So you just have the DBH is equals to null. So we declare the variables, and after declaring the variables, we have try catch block of code that is going to capture the exception. I have taken you to phpMyAdmin, where I have my database. So my database is called Kids Can Code. And this Kids Can Code has different tables. It has a table customers, it has a table employees, it has a table orders, and it has a table students. If I look at employees, we have James and we have Mark Mutegi. So we have employee details. I can add a new employee, and you can see the employees that were in the table. So this is the employee which is given, James M, Mark Mutegi, and the other details. So they are the ones which are given like this. Now what I want to do is to show you the operations I was talking about. If I click like add employee, this is going to give me another place where I can create a record. If I click on view the record, it's give me or shows the more details about that particular person. And if I want to edit, also it gives me a place where I can edit the details of these individuals. And if I click on the delete, it's going to delete this record. It's even asking me, do you want to delete? So if I say something like yes, so you can see now we are left with only one data value on the table. And I can even go to the database and refresh. These are, if I refresh on the database, you realize that we are only left now with only Mark Mutegi in that table. And if I add an employee, I can add the James. So James Karaoke, and I'm going to give the address as 11245, and probably their salary is 445 or 450,000. Then I submit. So that detail has been entered on the database. So if I go to the database and I refresh, you see, within my database now I have a James Karaoke who is has an address of 1245 and the salary is 45. Now you realize we are not doing, we are not entering data on the database using the normal way we were doing using the insert within the DB, but now we are using a form that is provided on the browser. So that is what we are trying to achieve by now doing a database connection. So if I show you the code for that, I'm going to go to the config file. So this is what I was trying to mention. The first thing to start with is the connection. So we are defining some variables that we are going to use. So we have defined the server or the host, we have defined the username, and we have defined the password and the name of the database. So we do the try. We attempt to connect to the database, and we are using the try so that we can capture the exception. To capture the exception means that if there is any error, then we are going to get the details as to why it has failed. We do a MySQL host. So the host is the server name, which is the local host. Then the name of the database, which is Kids Can Code, which is given like this. Then we have the data, the user, which is the now root, and the password, which is not given. Then we are setting the attributes for checking the error, which is given by attribute error mode and then attribute error mode exception. So after we have set this, then we can capture whatever problem is going to have been given. The other operations that you're going to do, and those are the ones I have mentioned, is that you can decide to insert and update. So an insertion is a kind of a create operation. The operations I have kept insisting on, which are the CRUD operations. So we have the create. So insert would be a form of a create. So what this does is that after I have declared there's a named placeholder. So this named placeholder is used to prepare statements that are going to be executed. So what we are doing, like in this, the DBH here is the database holder that, or the connection that we have already created. So we are going to use that database holder or connection to insert values, or even to update, or even to delete any operations that we want to do now on the database. After we have created it, now we can use that connection. So these are now the queries I was telling you, the SQL queries that you're going to use. So like we have an insert into, Fox is the name of the table, then the fields. So we have the name, the address, and the city, and then we declare the values. So this is a named placeholder. Instead of putting the values directly, which would mean we have an issue with the SQL injection, so we are going to use the placeholder. So a name, so this name, address, and the city is an example of a named placeholder. You can also use these question marks like this. So you can use the question marks like this, which are what we call unnamed placeholders. And then after that, you prepare the query. So all that is put in an insert, then into, and then after that, you bind the parameter. So we have the named value, the named placeholder, and then we insert the value. And then after that, you execute the statement. We have the queries for fetching the data, which will be just using the select. And these are the different classes or functions that can be used to do a selection. We have a select, name, address, and the city from the table, which is called now Fox. And you can, if you're getting more values or more records, then you can decide the fetch mode. So like in this case, the fetch mode is fetch a sock, which means it's going to fetch several, and we can loop through using the while loop to get all the rows. So as long as the fetch is true, then we'll keep looping and showing the name, the address, and the city.